In the quiet town of Marceline, Missouri, in the early 1900s. A young boy named Walt Disney wandered through open fields. Sketchbook in hand. He wasn't rich, he didn't have toys, but he had something that few others could see: imagination. Born on December 5, 1901, Walt Elias Disney was the fourth son in a family of 5. His father, Elias, was strict and hardworking. His mother, Flora, was gentle and nurturing. Walt's earliest memories were not of toys or grand cities, but of the farm animals he would sketch, the trees he climbed, and the laughter of his younger sister Ruth. Marceline shaped him. The town's simplicity, the trains that passed by, and the barn where he would perform impromptu shows with neighborhood kids. These became the seeds of his storytelling spirit. He loved to draw. Even when chores were endless, even when his father disapproved. Walt would doodle on scraps, on the margins of newspapers, or sometimes even on the walls. His first audience was a neighbor who paid him a few coins for a sketch of her horse. It was small, but for Walt, it was a beginning. As he grew older, the family moved to Kansas City, and life became harder. Walt delivered newspapers with his brother Roy, waking up before sunrise and walking miles in snow and rain. These years were tough, but they taught him discipline and persistence. Still, every spare moment was spent drawing or watching vaudeville shows. He fell in love with performance and humor. When World War I broke out, Walt wanted to join the army, but he was too young. Not one to take no for an answer, he forged his birth certificate and joined the Red Cross as an ambulance driver in France. While others wrote letters, Walt drew cartoons. His ambulance was covered in them. Though he didn't see combat, the war opened his eyes to a bigger world, and the endless stories waiting to be told. Upon returning to America, Walt had a new dream: to become a cartoonist. He studied art briefly and took on odd jobs in studios, always learning, always observing. Walt's first serious attempt at a studio came in 1921 with Laugh-O-Gram Films in Kansas City. He created short cartoons inspired by fairy tales with a modern twist. They were fresh, funny, and different. Walt hired young, ambitious artists and paid them with promises rather than money. But dreams require funding, and Walt had little. The studio struggled. Animations were expensive to make, and income was inconsistent. Eventually, he couldn't pay his employees, couldn't afford rent, and lived on scraps, at times eating cold beans or even dog food. Yet, in this darkest moment, a spark emerged. Walt created a character named Alice who would interact with animated characters. This mix of live action and animation caught some attention in Hollywood. With no money but one last dream, Walt packed up his drawings, said goodbye to his team, and boarded a train to California with $40, a suitcase, and a single reel of film. Hollywood in the 1920s was exploding with opportunity. Walt reunited with his brother Roy and set up shop in their uncle's garage. This was the birth of the Disney Brothers Studio. Their first project? The Alice Comedies, a blend of real-life footage and cartoons. They were quirky, creative, and popular enough to gain traction. The small studio grew. Walt met Ub Iwerks again, his old friend and brilliant animator. Together, they built something magical. In this time, another character took shape. Oswald the Lucky Rabbit. Universal Pictures distributed the cartoon, and Oswald became a hit. But in a cruel twist, Walt lost the rights to Oswald and most of his animators due to a contract technicality. He was devastated. He had nothing again. On the train ride back from that betrayal, Walt didn't cry. He sketched. He imagined a new character, one with big ears, a wide smile, and endless charm. That night, Mickey Mouse was born. Walt poured everything into Mickey. He and Ub Iwerks animated the first short, Plain Crazy. But it was Steamboat Willie, with synchronized sound, that changed everything. It was the first cartoon with sound and it stunned audiences. Mickey became a phenomenon. But success didn't mean peace. Walt was a perfectionist. He wanted to push animation further, more detail, more heart, more innovation. He created new characters, Minnie, Goofy, Donald. He introduced synchronized music in The Skeleton Dance. Behind the scenes, he worked day and night, driven not by money but by a vision. But the stress began to show: sleepless nights, health issues, emotional breakdowns. Still, he pushed on. To prove animation could be art, Walt launched the Silly Symphonies series. These shorts experimented with music, color, and storytelling. Flowers and Trees became the first cartoon in full Technicolor, and won an Academy Award. Audiences laughed and cried with Disney cartoons. Walt's reputation as a creative genius grew, but he was never satisfied. He didn't want to make cartoons forever, he wanted to make a full-length animated movie. People called him crazy. Critics dubbed it Disney's folly. But Walt didn't listen. Walt spent 3 years and nearly everything he had creating Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. It was a massive undertaking, hundreds of animators, hand-drawn cells, original music. He mortgaged his house, borrowed against future revenues, and suffered constant anxiety. But he believed. He believed in the story, in the power of animation to move hearts. In 1937, Snow White premiered. The audience laughed, cried, and stood in ovation. It was a triumph. The first full-length animated film in history, and a financial blockbuster. Walt proved everyone wrong. Dreams could come true. With profits from Snow White, Walt built a new studio in Burbank, state-of-the-art, innovative, and full of potential. He launched ambitious projects: Pinocchio, Fantasia, Dumbo, and Bambi. Each film pushed animation forward. Some were hits, others not. But Walt kept experimenting, trying to elevate storytelling, emotion, and art. But the pressure took its toll. Staff complained about long hours and low pay. A strike hit the studio, and Walt felt betrayed. He withdrew, heartbroken. Yet even in pain, he looked ahead. He began dreaming of something new, not a film, not a cartoon, but a place. A place where families could laugh, dream, and live inside the stories they loved. The 1940s were turbulent for Walt and the Disney Studios. World War II disrupted global markets, and several films underperformed. While Walt had reached incredible heights, the strike at his studio wounded him deeply. He had always seen his employees as family, and their revolt left him questioning everything. To keep the studio afloat, Disney produced propaganda and training films for the U.S. military. Though financially helpful, it felt like a creative detour. Walt, however, never stopped thinking ahead. He still had something bigger in mind, something no one had ever attempted. By the early 1950s, Walt had a new obsession: building a theme park. But not just any park. He wanted a place where adults and children could enjoy magic together. Clean, safe, imaginative, and immersive. But everyone around him doubted it. Amusement parks were seen as cheap and dirty. Walt's idea was considered ridiculous. Still, he started creating blueprints, working in secret, and forming a new company, WED Enterprises, to plan the park. To fund his dream, he struck a risky deal with ABC. The network would invest in his park if Walt created a weekly television show. Thus, Disneyland, the TV show, was born, and it captured the hearts of America. Walt personally oversaw every inch of Disneyland's construction. He walked the land, chose the plants, supervised designs, and hand-picked every ride. He believed that details mattered: the way a street smelled, the color of a fence, the friendliness of staff. Construction was rushed and over budget. The opening day, July 17, 1955, was chaotic: rides broke down, paint was still wet, and counterfeit tickets caused massive overcrowding. Critics called it a failure. But Walt smiled. Because he knew this was just the beginning. As weeks passed, Disneyland became a sensation. Families traveled from across the country. Children's eyes lit up when they saw Sleeping Beauty's castle, rode the teacups, or met Mickey Mouse. Walt didn't rest. He constantly improved the park, added new lands, and dreamed up attractions no one had imagined before. Pirates of the Caribbean, the Haunted Mansion, the Matterhorn, all were born from Walt's endless creativity. He famously said, "Disneyland will never be completed. It will continue to grow as long as there is imagination left in the world." Walt became a fixture in American households. His television shows taught children values, nature, and history. He wasn't just an entertainer, he was a teacher. He introduced the Mickey Mouse Club, The Wonderful World of Color, and nature documentaries that won Academy Awards. He believed television could educate, not just amuse. At the same time, Disney films continued to shine: Cinderella, Peter Pan, Sleeping Beauty, and later, Mary Poppins. Walt blended live action with animation, drama with delight. But still, he dreamed even bigger. Walt's biggest dream yet wasn't another movie or theme park. It was a city. A real, functioning city that would represent the future. He called it Epcot, Experimental Prototype Community of Tomorrow. It would be a living laboratory of innovation, sustainability, and modern living. It would use the best in transportation, communication, and design. Walt secretly bought thousands of acres in Central Florida, disguised under fake company names to avoid attention. The plan was massive, bigger than anything he'd ever done. In 1966, while working on Epcot and the upcoming Disney World, Walt was diagnosed with lung cancer. He had smoked all his life. Walt Disney didn't just make movies or theme parks. He made a way of thinking. A belief that imagination could solve problems. That hard work could build worlds, and that optimism could change lives. Today, the Walt Disney Company is one of the most influential media empires on Earth. From Pixar to Marvel, from theme parks on every continent to technology and storytelling, the Disney legacy is alive. But more importantly, Walt's values live on, in every child who dreams big. In every creator who refuses to quit, in every person who believes in magic. Failure is not final. Walt lost studios, characters, and money, but never hope. Details matter. A single blade of grass, a smile from a worker. Every part of the Disney experience was intentional. Dreams take work. He never sat back and waited. He worked harder than anyone. Imagination is power. From a mouse came an empire. All our dreams can come true if we have the courage to pursue them. Walt Disney. He was not perfect. He had flaws, fears, and failings. But he believed in something that the world needed more of: hope. And that hope lives on, in every castle, in every story, in every star that twinkles above a child who dares to dream. Walt Disney taught us that no dream is too big, and no person is too small to chase it. His life wasn't easy, but it was meaningful. And through his work, he made the impossible feel possible. So the next time you hear a child laugh, see a castle on a screen, or smile at a cartoon mouse, remember, it all started with a man who believed in dreams.